Open Stax Psychology, Chapter 10, Emotion and Motivation, Introduction. What makes us behave as we do? What drives us to eat? What drives us towards sex? Is there a biological basis to explain the feelings we experience? How universal are emotions? In this chapter, we will explore issues relating to both motivation and emotion. We will begin with a discussion of several theories that have been proposed to explain motivation and why we engage in a given behavior. You will learn about the psychological needs that drive some human behaviors, as well as the importance of our social experience in influencing our actions. Next, we will consider both eating and having sex as examples of motivated behaviors. What are the psychological mechanisms of hunger and satiety? What understandings do scientists have of why obesity occurs, and what treatments exist for obesity and eating disorders? How has research into human sex and sexuality evolved over the past century? How do psychologists understand study the human experience of sexual orientation and gender identity? These questions and more will be explored. This chapter will close with a discussion of emotion. You will learn about several theories that have been proposed to explain how emotions occurs, the biological underpinning of emotion, and the universality of emotions. Section 10.1, Motivation. Why do we do the things that we do? What motivations underlie our behaviors? Motivations describe the wants or needs that direct behavior towards a goal. In addition to biological motives, motivations can be intrinsic, arising from internal factors, or extrinsic. Intrinsically motivated behaviors are performed because of the sense of personal satisfaction that they bring, while extrinsically motivated behaviors are performed in order to receive something from others. Think about why you are currently in college. Are you here because you enjoy learning and want to pursue an education to making yourself a more well-rounded individual? If so, then you are intrinsically motivated. However, if you are here because you want a college degree to make yourself more marketable for high-paying careers or to satisfy the demands of your parents, then your motivation is more extrinsic in nature. In reality, our motivations are often a mix of both intrinsic and extrinsic factors. Both the nature of the mix of these factors might change over time. There is an old adage: choose a job that you love and you will never have to work a day in your life. Meaning that if you enjoy your occupation, work doesn't seem like, work. Some research suggests that this isn't necessarily the case. According to this research, receiving some sort of extrinsic reinforcements for engaging in behaviors that we enjoy leads to those behaviors being thought of as work, no longer providing that same enjoyment. As a result, we might spend less time engaging in these reclassified behaviors in the absence of an extrinsic reinforcement. For example, Odessa loves baking, so in her free time she bakes for fun. Oftentimes, stocking shelves at her grocery store job. She often whips up pastries in the evening because she enjoys baking. When a coworker in the stores bakery departments leave her job, Odessa applies for this position and gets transferred to the bakery department. Although she enjoys what she does in her new job, after a few months, she no longer has much desire to concoct tasty treats in her free time. Baking has become work in a way that changes her motivation to do it. What Odessa has experienced is called the over-justification effect. Intrinsic motivation is diminished when extrinsic motivation is given. This can lead to extinguishing the intrinsic motivation and creating a dependence on extrinsic reward for continued performance. Other studies suggest that intrinsic motivations may not be so vulnerable to the effect of extrinsic reinforcements, and in fact, reinforcements such as verbal praise might actually increase intrinsic motivation. In that case, Odessa's motivation to bake in her free time might remain high. For example, customers regularly compliment her baking or cake decorating skills. These apparent discrepancies in the research findings may be understood by considering several factors. For one, physical reinforcements such as money and verbal reinforcements such as praise may affect an individual in very different ways. In fact, tangible rewards tend to have more negative effects on intrinsic motivations than do intangible rewards. Furthermore, the expectations of the extrinsic motivators may be an individual expectations of the extrinsic motivator by an individual is crucial. If the person expects to receive an extrinsic reward, then intrinsic motivation for the task tends to be reduced. If, however, there is no such expectation and the extrinsic motivation is presented as a surprise, then intrinsic motivation for the task tends to persist. In educational settings, students are more likely to experience intrinsic motivation to learn when they feel a sense of belonging and respect in the classroom. This internalization can be enhanced if the evaluative aspect of the classroom are de-emphasized and if students feel that they exercise some control over the learning environment. Furthermore, providing students with activities that are challenging yet doable along with a rationale for engaging in various learning activities can enhance intrinsic motivation for those tasks. Consider Hakeem, a first-year law student with 2 years this semester, with 2 courses this semester, family law and criminal law. The family law professor has a rather intimidating classroom. He likes to put students on the spot with tough questions, which often leave students feeling belittled or embarrassed. Grades are based exclusively on quizzes and exams, and the instructor posts results of each test on the classroom door. In contrast, the criminal law professor facilitates classroom discussions and respectful debates in small groups. The majority of the course grade is not exam-based, but centers on a student's designed research project on a crime issue of the student's choice. Research suggests that Hakeem will be less intrinsically motivated in his family law course, where students are intimidated in the classroom setting and there is an emphasis on teacher-driven evaluations. Hakeem is likely to experience a higher level of intrinsic motivation in his criminal law course, where the class setting encourages inclusion, collaboration, and a respect for ideas, and where students have more influence over their learning activities. Theories about motivation. William James was an important contributor to early research into motivation, and he is often referred to as the father of psychology in the U.S. James theorized that behavior was driven by a number of instincts, which aid survival. From a biological perspective, an instinct is a species-specific pattern of behavior that is not learned. There was, however, considerable controversy among James and his contemporaries over the exact definition of instinct. James proposed several dozen human instincts, but many of his contemporaries had their own lists that differed. A mother's protection for her baby, the urge to lick sugar, and hunting prey were among the human behaviors proposed as true intrinsic during James' era. This view that human behavior is driven by instinct received a fair amount of criticism because of the undeniable role of learning in shaping all sorts of human behavior. In fact, as early as the 1900s, some instinctive behaviors were experimentally demonstrated to result from associative learning. Another early theory of motivation proposed that the maintenance of homeostasis is particularly important in directing behavior. You may recall from our earlier reading that homeostasis is the tendency to maintain a balance or optimal level with a biological system in a body. A body system, a control center, receives input from receptors. The control center directs efforts to correct any imbalance detected by the control center. According to the drive theory of motivation, deviations from homeostasis create psychological needs. These needs result in psychological drive states that direct behavior to meet the needs and ultimately bring the system back to homeostasis. For example, if it's been a while since you ate, your blood sugar levels will drop below normal. This blood sugar will induce a psychological need and corresponding drive state that will direct you to seek out and consume food. Eating will eliminate the hunger, and ultimately your blood sugar levels will return to normal. Interestingly, drive theory also emphasizes the role that habits play in the type of behavioral responses in which we engage. A habit is a pattern of behavior in which we regularly engage. Once we have engaged in a behavior that successfully reduces a drive, we are most likely to engage in that behavior whenever faced with the drive in the future. Extensions of drive theory take another account of levels of arousal as potential motivators. As you recall from your study of learning, these theories assert that there is an optimal level of arousal that we all try to maintain. If we are under-aroused, we become bored and will seek out some sort of stimulation. On the other hand, if we are over-aroused, we will engage in behaviors to reduce our arousal. Most students have experienced this need to maintain optimal levels of arousal over the course of their academic career. Think about how much stress students experience towards the end of spring semesters. They feel overwhelmed with seemingly endless exams, papers, and major assignments that must be completed on time. They probably yearn for the rest and relaxation that awaits them over the extended summer break. However, once they finish the semester, it does not take long before they begin to feel bored. Generally, by the time the next semester is beginning in the fall, many students are quite happy to return to school. This is an example of how arousal theory works. So what is the optimal level of arousal? What level leads to the best performance? Research shows that moderate arousal is generally best. When arousal is very high or very low, performance tends to suffer. Think of your arousal levels regarding taking an exam for this class. If your level is very low, such as boredom and apathy, your performance will likely suffer. Similarly, a high level, such as extreme anxiety, can be paralyzing and hinder performance. Consider the example of a softball team facing a tournament. They are favored to win their first game by a large margin, so they go into the game with a lower level of arousal and get beat by a less skilled team. But optimal arousal level is more complex than a simple answer that the middle level is always best. Researchers report Yerkes and John Dodson discovered that the optimal arousal level depends on the complexity and difficulty of the task to be performed. This relationship is known as the Yerkes-Dodson law, which holds that a simple task is performed best when arousal levels are relatively high, and complex tasks are best performed when arousal levels are low. Self-efficiency and social motives. Self-efficiency is an individual's belief in her own capability to complete a task, which may include a previously successful completion of the exact task or similar tasks. Albert Bandura theorized that an individual's sense of self-efficiency plays a pivotal role in motivating behaviors. Bandura argues that motivation derives from expectations that we have about the consequences of our behaviors, and ultimately, it is the appreciation of our capacity to engage in given behaviors that will determine what we do and the future goals that we set for ourselves. For example, if you have a sincere belief in your ability to achieve, and likely to take on challenging tasks and not let setbacks dissuade you from seeing the task through to the end. A number of theorists have focused their research on understanding social motives. Among the motives they describe are needs for achievements. Among the motives they describe are needs for achievements, affiliation, and intimacy. It is the need for achievement that drives accomplishment and performance. The need for affiliation encourages positive interactions with others, and the need for intimacy causes us to seek deep, meaningful relationships. Henry Murray categorized these needs into domains. For example, the need for achievements and recognition falls under the domain of ambition. Dominance and aggression were recognized as needs for the domain of human power, and play was a recognized need for the domain of interpersonal affection. Maslow's hierarchy of need. While the theories of motivation described earlier relate to basic biological drives, individual characteristics, or social contexts, Abraham Maslow proposed a hierarchy of needs that spans the spectrum of motives ranging from the biological to the individual to the social. These needs are often depicted as a pyramid. At the base of the pyramid are all the psychological needs that are necessary for survival. These are followed by basic needs for security and safety, the need to be loved and to have a sense of belonging, and the need to have self-worth and confidence. The top tier of the pyramid is self-actualization, which is a need that essentially equates to achieving one's full potential, and it can be realized when needs lower on the pyramid have been met. To Maslow, and humanistic theorists, self-actualization reflects the humanistic emphasis on positive aspects of human nature. Maslow suggested that this is an ongoing lifelong process, and that only a small percentage of people actually achieve a self-actualized state. According to Maslow, one must satisfy lower level needs before addressing those needs that occur higher in the pyramid. So, for example, if someone is struggling to find enough food to meet his nutritional requirements, it is quite unlikely that he would spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about whether others viewed him as a good person or not. Instead, all of his energies would be geared toward finding something to eat. However, it should be pointed out that Maslow's theory has been criticized for its subjective nature and its inability to account for phenomena that occur in the real world. Other research has more recently addressed that. The late in life Maslow proposed a self-transcendence level above self-actualization to represent striving for meaning and purpose beyond the concerns of oneself. For example, people sometimes make self-sacrifices in order to make a political statement or in an attempt to improve conditions of others. Mohandas Gandhi, a world-renowned advocate for independence through nonviolent protest, on several occasions went on hunger strikes to protest a particular situation. People may starve themselves or otherwise put themselves in danger, displaying high-level motives beyond their own needs.